One of my bold predictions for this upcoming season is that Oklahoma is going to have elite defense. Brent Venables is entering his third season with the Oklahoma Sooners football program, and this should finally be a defense that should play at a top 50 or top 40 level this year. The reasons for Oklahoma's defensive struggles in the past have mainly been because they haven't had enough talent and depth on the interior of their defensive line, and they've lacked a consistent pass rush. Well, this season, that should be a different story. Your pass rush should be consistent. You get a Miami of Ohio transfer and Caden Willard, who had 9.5 sacks last year. He was one of the best players in the MAC. You return two of your top leading sack producers and defensive end Ethan Downs and linebacker Danny Stutsman. And not enough people talk about how good of a player Danny Stutsman is. Like, let's talk about him for a quick second. This dude was a third-team AP All-American last year. He had 104 tackles, 3 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, 3 pass deflections, an interception, and 2 forced fumbles. He's one of the best players in the SEC this year that nobody is talking about. And then look at how deep their secondary is this season. Like, Oklahoma may have the deepest secondary in this conference this season. Their secondary is so deep. It's like you got safety Billy Bowman, who had 63 tackles, 6 interceptions, which was second in the nation, and he led all of college football and picked sixes with 3 of them. And then you have cornerbacks Gentry Williams, Woody Washington, who also are really good, experienced, productive guys. This secondary not only has great depth, but they also have great starting caliber talent. I mean, there aren't too many schools that you can say are 2 and 3 deep like Oklahoma is going into this season, especially in this new age of the transfer portal. A lot of these guys could be starters for LSU, and they could be starting for Brian Kelly this year, the guy we was just talking about. A lot of these guys who are probably not going to play for Oklahoma this year are good enough that they can start on a handful of Power 5 programs this year. That's how deep Oklahoma's secondary is, and it's a good reason why they were 3rd in the nation in takeaways last season, and they should remain at least top 10 in that category going into this season with so much experience returning and proven production. And on the interior of their defensive line, you get Dominic Williams from TCU, who Brian Kelly was butthurt that he wasn't able to get. You get Jermaine Lowell from Louisville. Now, he had a down 2023 season, but in 2022, this dude was an absolute monster. Oklahoma is going to shock a lot of people with how good they're going to be this year. Now, I don't know about their offense. I got some questions about Jackson Arnold, how consistent he's going to be, how it's going to work with that new OC they have, replacing Jeff Lebby. And the offensive line also has, some concerns too with the amount of transfers that they're bringing in. Are they going to be able to have that offensive line playing at an elite level? But in terms of this defense can be what carries Oklahoma this year. And that defense played really good for the first half of last season up until they beat Texas. It was really weird that when they got against Texas, because that game was damn near like their Super Bowl, because after it, they never played at that same level for the remainder of the season. But with how good you're going to be on the defensive line and with how deep and talented your secondary is, it's really hard for this defense to be anything less than at minimum a top 50 unit. And Brent Venables, I love this dude. He's one of my favorite head coaches in college football. But if this defense can't perform this year, then I do have some question marks about him being able to succeed in Norman. Because if you're a defensive-minded coach, the worst part of your team for 3 years straight can't be your defense. And he put together some really great defenses during his time at Clemson. And I get that Rome wasn't built in a day. And it was going to take some time, because anytime you're lacking talent and depth on the defensive line, it's just not something that you can fix from one portal class or one recruiting cycle, because you also have to develop those guys. But one thing that Brent Venables has done at a very high level is develop the recruits that he's brought in. Hell, most of the guys in this secondary that have played at a high level were Brent Venables recruits. They had a freshman last year that was one of the best freshmen in all of the Big 12. So with how well Oklahoma has recruited, especially on defense, and how good they are at developing players on that side of the football, there's no reason why this shouldn't be elite defense in 2024, man. And with how their schedule lines up, there are tons of teams this season that have question marks on defense. LSU has question marks on defense. And hell, even though LSU has an all-star studded coaching staff, what they're lacking is the talent. Oklahoma has that. I just can't see Oklahoma's defense not being elite this year. And it's a large reason why I believe this team is being heavily overlooked. There are people who don't even have Oklahoma in their top 25s. Like, what are we doing? This team, according to 247 Sports, when they look at overall team talent and they put together your transfer portal rankings and your recruiting rankings, Oklahoma's a top 15 team. They're like 12th. Last season, they were the 7th most talented team in college football according to 247 Sports Team Talent Composite Rankings. This is year 3 for Brent Venables. I've been a little bit patient with them. I haven't been too critical of him his first 2 years because I understand that he had to rebuild some things, especially when you got to rebuild a defense that played under Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley, he doesn't really prioritize defense. It took him until him getting his ass kicked last year to finally realize, hey, yeah, we definitely do have to prioritize defense, especially when we're going to the Big Ten because it's a different style of football down there in that part of the country. But for Brent Venables, though, he understands it. That's why they went and they got a Dominic Williams, who had 33 tackles and 5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks for TCU last year. That's why you go and you get a Jermaine Lowell from Louisville. There's just a lot of talent on this Oklahoma defense that isn't getting talked about enough. I'm really surprised that the national media is overlooking this team as much as what they are. This defense is super talented, and they're stacked at nearly every position on their secondary. If one guy gets injured, next man up. They got 4- and 5-star recruits at every position on that secondary. Linebackers, stacked. Defensive line, pretty good. It's just we got to start seeing production out of that defensive line. But if that defensive line puts it all together, like how I believe they will, with how shut down that secondary is going to be, it's going to be tough to beat Oklahoma this year, even if their offense struggles, because they can help out their offense with how good they are at forcing takeaways. One way to help out your offense, the best offense, is a great defense. You get a turnover, you put your offense in favorable field position. I really like Oklahoma's defense this year, and I'm really high on Oklahoma as a team. It was a Sooners fan in my comment section who's been a loyal subscriber for some time who says he can see them going to Atlanta. I don't know about that because I still got to see more out of that offense, but, I'm definitely not going to write them off, though. You're definitely up there. In terms of ranking the best defenses in the SEC going into this year, Oklahoma at least can't be no less than top 3 or top 5. There are so many teams in this conference that couldn't get defense right. LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, they're still trying to figure it out. Don't sleep on Oklahoma's defense in 2024. My bold prediction is that this is going to be an elite unit. Brent Venables is finally going to have a Brent Venables style defense. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to be attacking. It's going to be suffocating. And it's going to be hard to score on them. You're going to be hard-pressed to find as many teams that are as deep as what Oklahoma is on this side of the football.